Before we wrap up, I'd like to actually finally bring in Ahmed Quraishi in Islamabad. Unfortunately, we would have loved to have had you much earlier in the program, Mr. Quraishi, but we're going to give you a chance here very quickly to just comment. I don't know if you've actually listened to much of the program so far, but by and large, both the other guests felt that Pakistan should not feel aggrieved if India and the United States have a stronger relationship, A, and B, if India has further influence in Afghanistan. What do you think?
Well, the history actually does not support this view. We've had once before a situation where India had extensive influence inside Afghanistan. That was back in the 1970s when the government in Kabul was very close to the Soviet Union, and later when Afghanistan was under Soviet occupation. And our experience at that time was that the Afghan soil at that time was used, and Kabul actually was used to put pressure on Pakistan. And in fact, one of the insurgencies that we see right now in our province of Balochistan began to take shape during that period. And it's history, it's a Cold War history, it's the past. It shouldn't repeat itself, but unfortunately, after 9/11, after India began to again reassert its influence in Kabul, we've seen the rebirth of those Cold War grievances, the rebirth of some terrorist groups that were based in Afghan back in the 70s that died with the death of the Soviet Union, but suddenly, mysteriously, they cropped up again after 2002. So we have a history that supports the Pakistani argument and concern that while India invests in the development of infrastructure in Afghanistan, which I don't think anybody in Pakistan objects to, but we don't want to see a repeat of a situation where the Afghan soil and the Afghan government is used to put pressure on Pakistan to settle what essentially are bilateral Indo-Pakistani problems, Kashmir and others.
Okay, and if I could try to summarize some of the other points, I'll put it all into one. One of them was that Pakistan doesn't really have a right to feel squeezed strategically by both India and Afghanistan. And one of the other points was that India in Afghanistan has contributed in terms of agriculture, media, infrastructure, all sorts of positive things in Afghanistan over the past 8 years. Pakistan hasn't seemed to have done too much.
It's not a question of Pakistan doing too much. It's a question of, again, in Pakistan, I don't think anybody in Pakistan is objecting to India contributing to the infrastructure, doing the good stuff. Unfortunately, the world media, and specifically the American media and the British media, do not really focus much on what we've been discussing with the Americans. Robert Gates, for example, was in New Delhi, and he came back to Pakistan, and he actually said publicly that he did discuss with the Indians, for example, the Pakistani grievances of Indian involvement in Balochistan. This is not a conspiracy theory. There's a lot of evidence on the ground to support it. This is not the place to discuss all of that evidence, but that's there. The Admiral Mullen knows about it. General Petraeus knows about it. That evidence has been shared, and it's there. And partially, the Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh seemed to have accepted partially some of that evidence during the summit meeting between our Prime Minister and Mr. Singh in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt last year. So it's there. While India is doing the good stuff, I don't think Pakistan has any problem with that, but we have a problem when India tries to assert its presence in Afghanistan and use it in covert ways against Pakistan, which is happening, by the way. Some of the weapons that we found, some of the terrorists that we arrested on the border region between Afghanistan and Pakistan, some of them really are not just Al-Qaeda and Taliban. Some of them have to do with some of the intelligence activities that are happening in Afghanistan. And while we discuss Afghanistan, let's just quickly remember that Afghanistan right now is a black hole for all sorts of covert activities that are besides the declared ones, the declared being, of course, against Al-Qaeda and Taliban, but there's a lot of other posturing and positioning that's taking place in Afghanistan, and we can discuss that later.
Okay. Apologies, gentlemen. It was and to the viewer, it was a lopsided discussion, but it was purely for logistical reasons. I'm glad all of you at least got your point across, General Ravi Saunhi, Richard Weitz, and belatedly Ahmed Quraishi. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here for this discussion.